Move on to agenda item 5, a discussion item. This is a discussion of issues surrounding Madison Police Department. Several members of this committee requested that this item be placed on the agenda today, so obviously we have done so. It's rather general discussion item, as you can see from the agenda. So wanted to just explain at the outset that there's certainly no action planned this evening on this front. We're certainly providing opportunity for members of the committee to speak on any items relating to the police department, and then committee members and certainly any council members will have the same opportunity to do so today. As a reminder to my colleagues and to let members of the community know, this meeting will need to adjourn by 5:45 this evening, because we have a briefing by the Madison Public Library scheduled in this room at 5:45. So our time is limited this evening, and we likely probably will need to refer the balance of the agenda, I'm guessing after item 5, to our next meeting, the committee, perhaps with the exception of a very quick discussion of the Common Council Office budget submittal for the 2017 operating budget, which we need to do at this meeting to meet the schedule by the Finance Department. So with all that said, is there any clarification needed before I start offering the podium to members of the community? Okay, seeing none, to several members of the community here that wish to speak to us tonight, just want to explain you have a right to use either podium, to my right or my left, your choice. We'll have microphones turned on for you. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, which is customary, so each of you will have 3 minutes. The timer will go off when your 3-minute limit has been reached, and we'll ask you to please just finish your sentence at that time. And so I think with that, we will start. And I believe these are in the order they were received by us in terms of speaker slips. So the first member wishing to speak is, a member of the community wishing to speak is Chris Wood, followed by Barbara Chuzid, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. You can correct me as you come forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here just as a resident of this city that I have come to love. I am deeply disturbed by what has been happening in our city, as well as our culture, with the polarization. And I'm here to ask that we listen to the anger, to the pain, and to the fear that I imagine that will be spoken. I'm all of those things. On Thursday night, I went and emailed a letter to Chief Koval, and then heard about the events on Morrison Street, a quarter-mile from my house. I also know that when we stay in the blame and the anger of polarizing and othering someone else, we stay trapped in the victim-perpetrator model. I know this because I went through a very miserable divorce in another country, and I had to do the internal work in me to move beyond how I felt I had been wronged, because my love for my children was greater than my anger at my ex-husband. I'm here to ask that our love for our community, all of our community members, no matter their color, no matter their race, no matter their country of origin, that we hold those people in our hearts. This takes courage. As a white woman, I can't know of anyone else's experience unless I'm willing to ask them. And we need to be willing to hear these painful, difficult stories for a model. And I don't know what the model looks like. I only know that I've been embodying it day to day, moment to moment, with varying degrees of skill depending on the day. But I keep coming back to the love of my children. And I only had time, because my printer was acting up, to make a copy of Donna Hicks of the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard University. She has the essential elements of dignity. And I think we have to return to human dignity of all human beings. We have to return to respect. We have to be willing to not know so that we can create a future that is different than what we have been experiencing. We all need to take responsibility for how we've contributed to that. And that's part of why I'm here, to make my voice heard, to reach out to people of different experiences so that we can build this community and make it stronger so that we cannot have this. I think it would be all too easy to express our rage and stay in that. Of course I had that time. and it took me 2 years of lots of tears. But I think having the courage to reach beyond, because we are on the Native American lands of council. This is where we all live. We can create a different way. We do have different choices than just the easy choices of fear and rage. And I also just want to name, I'm not just some airy-fairy. I lived through a shooting in my physics department in 1991 at the University of Iowa. So I do have some, I do know fear in my body, an expletive. My mother's going to know I died in the physics department. And we have a choice not to listen to the fear. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Barbara Chuza, to be followed by Gregory Kalimpic. I apologize for any mispronouncing names. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Barbara Chusid, and I'm a Madison public school teacher for the last approximately 30 years. And I've seen a lot of, in the last couple of years, I've worked with kids who have been victims of some of the violence over on the east side. I'm really frustrated by the lethal reaction of the Madison police to people who are being perceived as threatening, but actually out of control through mental illness or substance abuse. It just seems like there's got to be something else to do besides shoot them dead. And I know that there have been a lot of circumstances where people have been controlled in other ways, but it's really appalling. I haven't come up and spoke before in a situation like this, but I was just, after the last shooting, I was just, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen? Something's got to change. We don't want the reputation of Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they had shootings of 42 people by the police. I just read and heard secondhand of the reactions of the police chief to criticism or implied criticism, and it's pretty scary to see somebody bristle like that rather than open his ears and say, wow, what are these people saying? It's quite scary. So that's really basically all I'm here to say. I'm really glad that I hope there's some movement on the city council to take a stand on the actions of the police department, and specifically the police chief. I think the police don't want to be doing this. They just have to be trained in different methods of control. And I think they're in misery too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gregory, and I always pronounce your last name, sir. To be followed by Omavik McMurray.
Hello, I'll be brief. One, there's been yet another officer-involved shooting of someone incapacitated by mental illness. We want a standard higher than what is legal for the use of force. We want the sanctity of life as a moral standard. Two, as I've written to you, there's apparently been yet another horrendous use of force incident by MPD officers against people who are black, many of them children. And so far, it appears to have been effectively covered up. Three, I would like to encourage the Madison Common Council to support MPD by demanding that they maintain a high standard for behavior and leadership. Someone who truly supports MPD and wishes to see it be a national model would not favor continuing on its current trajectory. Four, you have the power to change MPD policies, procedures, and training under statute. You have a responsibility over, supervisory responsibility over MPD. MPD must obey all your lawful orders, and you have the general power to act for the good order and safety of the city. I ask that you use that power. Please do what is morally right. Five, there needs to be a mechanism for external investigations into officer-involved incidents. You have the power to set up such a mechanism. Six, I also ask that alders file complaints with the Police and Fire Commission about the behavior of Chief Koval. His behavior with you broke MPD and City of Madison policy. It's unacceptable for me as City Department Manager. It is only the latest incident and an ongoing pattern of behavior. History shows that change in the police department cannot occur with resistant leadership. Then I'll add a couple more things. You've seen petitions on both sides. The Stop the Attacks in the Police Department petition does have considerably more signatures, including a bunch of Madison residents. But I would note that based on comments from signatories listing city of residents, the majority of signers are apparently not Madison residents. While by the same measure, about 80% of the signers on the Progressive Day petition asking alders to file complaints to the PSC or Madison residents. Also, one person who is no longer a Madison resident but who signed the requested data petition is, if you might recognize, David Cooper. One last note. Today I heard from the sister of Michael Schumacher, the person killed in the latest officer-involved shooting. Her name's Christina. She wrote me, if the police suspected Michael was mentally ill, they really should have called somebody with psych training to the scene. Mike was having an episode and was probably scared. Mike is my brother, and I know the situation could have been diffused by a non-armed individual just wanting to talk to him. He was not a violent person. My heart is broken. I saw your comments and really appreciate what you had to say on the matter. Having a family member with mental illness can be difficult because the community doesn't typically understand mental illness. So your support and the support from others means everything to my family. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Olivia McMurray, to be followed by Michelle Hicks.
Hello, my name is Olivia McMurray. I've been providing childcare here in Madison for almost 40 years. There are many families that I'm still connected with that live on the east side and that have been deeply affected by the killings of the last few years. I came to speak for a few different reasons. My main concern is that I feel worried about how Chief Koval is, how he's leading the police department. I have a friend who is a member of the police department, and I think lovingly of the time we spent up at the Capitol and of all the support and all the Madison residents and how we were all in it together there. And I miss that kind of connection. I had questioned a concern about Tony Robinson's killing, and I became a thug. The same kind of things that have happened in our states where there's this division, I am now considered a thug to my friend. And another friend of mine was sharing the same experience that he had with his police friend, where because he raised a concern, all of a sudden he was jumped all over. And so the two of us are thinking, well, why is this? They've been our friends a long time. We should be able to talk about what happened with Tony Robinson without being put into this category. And then I saw the video of Janelle Laird, and to me, when that second officer jumped out and pounded on her like that, it was really clear to me that the leadership is really affecting all of us, and that we need to step back and to try to find a way where we can deal with the issues we have. There's a lot of stress in our neighborhoods. We all know the economic issues and the racial issues and mental health issues. There's not enough funding for mental health and all that. So we do need to deal with these issues, but we need to find a way to address the police department when they come into the community and deal with people. When there are stressors happening, we need to find much more humane ways of dealing with that. The last note I guess I want to say is that my former child care and also my godson had a brother who was arrested a few years ago, and he's with me today. And he said to me when he heard about the last shooting, he said, you know, if my brother had done what he had done a few years ago, he'd be dead. He was shot with rubber bullets, and he's okay, and he's doing really well now. And, you know, whatever has shifted so that we're going into the shooting rather than finding other ways of dealing with stressful situations, we've just got to find another way. So please consider really changing the leadership of the police department so we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Michelle Hicks, to be followed by Sue Pastor.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hicks. This is my daughter Erin. We're here to share our story that happened last November in East High School, and just kind of give an example of some of the escalation and some of the escalation that's happening in our schools, and some with someone that has a lot of mental health issues. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our story today. So I wrote this back a while ago, but recently there was an extensive coverage about a student that was expelled from school. Many people felt the school staff didn't follow their own policies or handle the situation in a just manner. Although I don't know the specifics of the case, I do want to share our daughter's mistreatment at school, in which the staff did not follow our district's behavior education plan or our daughter's behavior intervention plan, which is part of her individual education plan and is governed by the Federal Individuals with Disabilities Act. Our daughter is someone who has a lot of special needs and is also on the autism spectrum. I am sharing this to hopefully prevent other students and families from going through an experience like hers. On 11/9/2015, our daughter was struggling to get to her class due to her anxiety level. According to her BIP, she is supposed to be provided a safe place to go within the school, as well as staff calling a parent to help de-escalate any type of situation. This did not happen. Instead, she was told by staff that she could go sit outside in the cold, go to the class she was too anxious to attend, or go to the in-school suspension room. Several minutes into her wait, she was approached by security staff and then the principal, who told her to leave the atrium. She refused to do this. Rather than following my daughter's bid by giving her space to process and to call me directly, the principal chose to call the educational resource officer, who then called the police. They were called because she refused to wait outside in the cold. Thankfully, she called me on her own so that I could help her process. During our phone call, she asked the principal 3 different times to give her space and she would be able to calm down. That did not happen. I was able to help her calm down enough to go outside and we would come immediately to pick her up. But unfortunately, she was never given the opportunity. Instead, I had to listen over the phone as my daughter was tackled to the ground as she screamed for help, was handcuffed, then removed from the school, dragged on the floor. She was arrested and taken to jail. As a mother, I thought that listening to what happened over the phone was the worst thing I had to go through. But the video was worse. It showed my daughter sitting, doing no harm to anyone, while others walked freely around the space. It ended tragically with my daughter being attacked by 3 adults. She received a 3-day suspension, over $600 in fines, and was taken to Dane County Jail in response to a level 1 incident, refusing to cooperate with directions. According to our district's behavioral education plan, this is an injustice that needs to be fixed, and people need to be held accountable for their actions.
Your time has expired.
Is
Do
it?
you have what you wish to say? So we should
No,
get
that's fine.
permission to
No,
continue.
that's fine.
Okay,
That's good.
you're complete. All right,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sue Pastor, to be followed by Amelia Royko-Moyer.
I want to be very brief, and I just came today to acknowledge that we are all together in a bad place. It's not a place that any of us asked to be or want to be. We have evolved toward a standard of police response that is reactionary, that is making us all more unsafe, including the police. I'm here to ask you to use your leadership in 2 ways. One, toward accountability. A public official who behaves in the way that the chief has and does that with impunity is setting a very low bar for both city residents and officers and for other city staff as well. Second, I'm asking you to use your leadership toward change, and change in policy. It is wonderful that we have the study going forward. What can you do while that proceeds to evolve us toward a standard that is higher than what can legally be justified for police response, that is morally better than shoot to kill, and respects the sanctity of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker at this point is Amelia Royko-Meyer.
Thank you for giving me some time to comment, and also thank you again for passing the audit. It's so very important. Stunning, the response. Never seen a hospital or public transport do that when they're being audited, or a university, or, I've never seen them go into a Bobby Knight style tirade, but for some reason the police department did. But thank you for passing that. I have heard a number of stories similar to the mother that just spoke, people coming to the CRT asking if we can help with formal complaints. I think this happens more often than we know, but because we aren't there and people are so exhausted by it, we don't end up hearing about it. I just want to share with you, over the last 2 weeks, I have been receiving email and comments on Facebook shaming my behavior in trying to both hold police officers accountable when they fail, and also find ways for them to reach fulfill their potential health-wise, mentally and physically. We're only supposed to do one of those things. We're only supposed to celebrate them. But I'm being told that my behavior is shameful. And what I find interesting is that my behavior is held to a higher standard than that of our chief of police. And I have to say, we have a number of complaints that are going to the PFC now, and I really hope you beat us to it, because that is a demonstration of leadership. What he did here that day, that tantrum that he threw, those threats he made in his blog post. I was on a thread with a gentleman who writes a blog in town the other night, and we were going back and forth, and I said, "I'm watching you." And I quoted what Koval had written in his blog. This guy's friend jumps on, and he says, "You're threatening my friend. This is not okay. It's inappropriate for you to speak to him that way." Wow. And I said, well, that's, I'm just quoting Chief Koval, but I am comforted by the fact that we agree that that is, in fact, a threat. And also, I'd like us all to recognize that there are other members of leadership, specifically one that has to do with the mental health and mental wellness training in the police department, that are engaging in questionable activities on Facebook. And that's as far as I'm going to go, but that will be coming forward soon. I sincerely hope that this council uses their power to the fullest extent to pay respect to our chief and hold him to a standard that's respectable for his behavior. I was going to read a list of 20 characteristics of a narcissist who wants to control your life, because I think everybody would recognize every single one of them. I just want to say finally, my first meeting with Chief Koval was with community members on the Near East Side. May I just have one more minute?
Is there objection? No objection. Please go ahead.
Some of you have probably already heard this story. There was a woman sitting next to me who said, "I am afraid when you pull me over. You seem rather stiff and you have that gun around your waist and I'm concerned." And an officer in the room got really emotional and said, "That's not our intention. We don't want you to feel that way." Okay. Then Dr. Greg Ulembic presents statistics that show New York City, for a certain period of time, had fewer officer-involved fatalities per capita than Madison did. And Chief Koval started screaming at him with that arsenal around his waist over math. Instead of looking at him and saying, "Partner with me, I want to see everything you have. Thanks for not going to the media first. Let's look at this." Instead, he flipped out. And I stood up and I said, "Stop. You are screaming at someone about math and you have an arsenal around your waist. Do you understand what we were just talking about?" And he started crying. He had just been through 2 officer-involved fatalities. He was under stress, but he started crying. And he apologized, which is, I guess, only happens when there's no camera on him. And he said, "We have a mutual friend. May I just have 30 more seconds?"
Any objection? Seeing none, go ahead.
He said, "We have a mutual friend," and I asked her once, "What is my strength and what is my weakness?" And she said, "Both are your passion." And I asked him to do something about that. That's not cheeky, we don't think that's cute, like do something about that passion. And he still hasn't done anything about that passion. And we left that meeting and Greg said, "I'm very worried." And I said, "I'm not, but you know what? I grew up around that rage and that passion, going up and down and that abuse. That's what this relationship is. It's an abusive one, and it needs to end. And then maybe we can start healing. Then maybe we can start looking at our strengths and weaknesses and coming together as a community. But the abusive relationship needs to stop now. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the community wishing to speak this evening? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any questions of any of our speakers by members of the committee? Any questions at all by any members of the committee? The speakers? Seeing none, then, okay, certainly Alderperson DeMar. Ms. Hicks, I believe. Please join us again.
Thank you. Was your daughter, and were you ultimately given any help?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Were you ultimately given any help?
In what way?
Trauma?
No.
No. You weren't offered any help by anyone?
We
on
were
the
not,
administrative
the
side?
school did not apologize, the school did not take any responsibility. The officers were horrible. I wasn't even allowed to talk to her. They had her in the car by the time I got to the school. I explained to them that she was on the spectrum. They didn't care.
And how old was your daughter when this happened?
17, just turned, days prior to this incident.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions of Ms. Hicks? Seeing none, thank you again, ma'am. Any questions by any colleagues of any of our registrants? Seeing none. So that leads us to a discussion generally, as I stated at the outset. Several of you requested this item to be placed on the agenda. We purposely worded it as broadly as possible, hopefully skirting the open meetings law requirements. So I leave it up to any of you to begin our discussion. Would anybody like to begin with their thoughts about this matter at all? Person Vidar has volunteered. Person Vidar, thank you.
Always a volunteer. Can you tell we raised our hand in class when I was a kid? So a couple of thoughts. I have to say that these are by far the most, I think, challenging times of my time in this city, and I think my time in many other cities that I lived with before coming here. And I think we owe it to our community to be very clear on action that we can take as a council. I think it's been clear over the past few weeks to me that we have had a lot of conversations, but there is a kind of lack of clarity of who, when, how do we really take some action moving forward that starts really the process that I think you outlined so well, which is both a process of hearing the other, of accountability, and of really moving us forward from this really painful place we're in as a community. So that's it as background. The one proposal that I would like us to entertain is whether we could have a council president ad hoc committee made up of X number of alders. I don't really know how many, nor do I really care about how many alders, but 3 to 5 alders that really can very specifically work on a charge in really bringing forth some very specific action that the council can then take around this issue of police and community. Again, I don't have all the clarity right now of what those specific actions would look like, what we're talking about, but I think that there is an extreme need to be able to have more intense ability to talk as a group, as a smaller group, to really hear, engage the community, hear some of the potential proposal, hear from the city attorney about, what our limitations may be, and then come up with a proposal for the council to then discuss. And I don't see us being able to do that as a large body because it's hard for us to have discussions among 20. I don't think CCOC is also a little big for us to have that kind of discussion. And I've seen in the past success with our council presidents, committees that we formed in really having some focused discussion and over a short period of time and moving us forward as opposed to waiting for a month from now, the next CCLC meeting, and then another. I think there is really urgency here, and I just, there is urgency for everybody, and I can't sleep well at all, and as I know many people can't, and I'm not, and I'm like 10 steps removed from those who are, have had the direct situations happen to them. So I cannot even imagine the amount of distress and pain that people are really going through. So again, so that's my very specific proposal that I want to put forth for maybe my colleagues to discuss. I do think that whoever is designated to be on such committee, if that's what we decide to ask the council president to do, needs to be very committed to put a lot of hours over the next month so that we can really move quickly on this. Those are my thoughts for that.
Thank you. Person Campbell is next.
Thank you, and thank you for making a space for us and the community to bring their concerns. And I know it's just a handful of people, and we all know from our email how many other dozens and hundreds more in the petitions actually have concerns that are different, but are concerned with this topic of community relations with the police department. And the more we hear, the more we know. And I really appreciate, Chris, your opening things up with an acknowledgement of just the super painful place that everyone is in around this. I've been haunted by Chief Koval's words to the press on Friday morning, either Thursday night or Friday morning, saying that the officer who responded to the situation on Morrison Street on Thursday night was, quote, compelled to shoot him. And it just, that word compel, I don't know if, sometimes I've had multiple communications with the chief over the last years, and multiple times we have to go back and forth to really, for me to understand what exactly he's saying. But that word, it made me feel sick to my stomach that we are compelling our city workers to take the life of another human being when responding to a situation like that. And I can't get over that. That's what keeps me up at night, is that do our policies really compel our workers in the police department to take the life of another human being under the conditions that were there? And I mean, I can understand if we say that is an option, that there are legal standards for that kind of use of force, but again, that compelling. And I wonder, what does that do to the officers who are in a situation like that and don't choose to use lethal force? Are they negligent? I don't know. I mean, there are all these questions that are really, really haunting me as a leader in this city, as an elected leader of 1/20th of the population of the people in this city. Is that really what we want? And that's the question I hear the folks who came up. Is that even what, I mean, the officers I know and I've talked to, and I spent a couple hours this afternoon with in the North Precinct and with some officers, and that's the last thing they want to do is unholster their weapon and have to use it that way. And I wonder what kind of support and training we're doing for officers to help them respond in other non-lethal ways. I don't know. And I am really, my vote to affirm the allocation of money for the study is just, totally confirmed by my current thinking. And I hope we can get answers to those questions. And after we get answers to those questions, we can really come up with some policy solutions. In the meantime, there is this gap. There's this gap between what is legally justifiable in terms of the use of force, sort of a rock bottom standard, the Graham versus Connor standard, and what a majority of our community members, how they expect to be treated in distress. And there's a big difference between those two things. And that's something I think we, as a subcommittee that Alder Bedar suggested, or somehow we as community leaders need to initiate that conversation, start having it, start making room for police officers to discuss that, start making room for anyone who wants to discuss that while the study's going on, so that we can have a really robust data and about what people think, how they expect to be treated, and what standards we want to set for ourselves and each other, and how we treat each other in this city. And I just, police officers spend their careers witnessing the worst in human behavior. That's what we ask them to do. We ask them to deal with the most difficult behaviors that we have with each other, and authorize them to use force in dealing with that. We give them that power, and we want them to have that power. But I think there's a lot of room for discussion in terms of what more tools can we give them to deal with these extremely difficult situations in a way that doesn't have to end up with anyone being hurt or killed. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Alderperson DeMar is next, to be followed by Alderperson Rommel.
Thank you. During the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, I found myself increasingly saddened by the discussion and the division in our city. And I didn't expect it this way. I mean, I look at the world and see the division. I look at our country, our state, and now it's our city. And there's such a prevalent message out there that if you are not with me, you are against me, which I find to be the most ridiculous phrase that anyone could possibly utter. I found myself being blamed, criticized, both to all alders and to me personally, because I sponsored the committee to do the review, because I sponsored work to be done to look at body cameras, because I didn't want it in the budget before we knew what we were doing. And I will firmly say today that those decisions were made in support of the police department. They absolutely were. And I will, as I said at the council meeting a couple weeks ago, it's very uncomfortable to be under a microscope. Everyone sitting in this chamber understands that, because that's how we work. That's how what we're saying right now. It's right out there for everyone to know and everyone to criticize or support, hopefully. It's very uncomfortable. And I'm sure continues to be very uncomfortable for Chief Koval and all of the folks that report up to him. They probably have not had this sort of review before. Okay, so be it. it's okay to be uncomfortable. Because if we're really going to learn and we're really going to understand, that's what it takes. And will this committee and this review come up with things to improve upon? Yes, I would hope so. I would think that there's going to be a list of things. Does that mean that we don't have a decent police department? It does not. It does not mean that at all. For the past over 3 years, I've worked very closely with the East Side Precinct. I would hold Captain Schaaf up to the highest, I do, to the highest regard, and the people that report to her. We're on a first name basis with many of the officers. Does that mean that they don't make mistakes? It does not. It does not mean that. Does it mean that anyone in this chamber does not make mistakes? It does not. Of course we do. Of course we do. The key is to own up to it and to want to be better and to want to go forward together instead of to divide. And that's what makes me so desperately sad, is the division that has been in this city since a month, 6 weeks. When did the blog come out? It was, I remember reading it, it took my breath away. The attack took my breath away. Because of course we support our police department. And to say something different is ludicrous. It's meant to divide. And I cannot tell you the exception I take with that sort of behavior. So yes, I do think we need to have more conversation. I don't know that we need a subcommittee. I don't know that CCOC can't have extra meetings. But I do believe, I think I heard down here, it could be a committee of 20. I believe people need to be able to come and to talk and to understand. And we need to hear from our officers. We need to hear from the command staff. We need to hear from our community. This is not, if we're not with you, or we're with you, we're against you. That's not what this is. This is about trying to be and striving to be the very best we can for everyone who lives in our city. Everyone. So I'm not sure the decision will be made, but once it's made, I hope you act swiftly. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson Rummel, to be followed by Alderperson McKinney.
I appreciate all the thoughts that have been shared so far. Mine aren't as maybe as coherent as some of yours, but I guess after last Thursday, if you'd asked me before last Thursday what I would say at this meeting, it has slightly changed. And what I really think about now, that there are several threads of things that we need to deal with. One is, does our chief have the management skills he needs to have to be an effective leader of that organization? Can we help him get those skills, or should we consider what happens if that is not able to be accomplished? I'm not promoting or denying, I'm just putting that out there. Another one is, there's racial disparities in our system, our broader judicial system, our broader economy, our broader world. So, we're not going to solve them necessarily by breaking down every piece of training and policy, but it's embedded, and we all know that to at least some degree. But the thing that really gets me now is, we expect the police to be everything. We expect them to be social workers, mental health workers, and we've expanded our programs, which I've supported. I think that's good. But at some point, our mental health system is failing our community. And it's not that the police only are responsible, it's a broader failure. And how are we going to make sure that people like Mr. Schumacher, when that first 911 call came in, when he's just merely in the lake, fully clothed, acting kind of weird, that somebody wasn't dispatched to help him? And, it's all speculation. I have no idea if that could have happened or what would have happened. But you have to ask yourself, well, if we had those resources, how could we have helped people? And so to me, that's one of the biggest things. It seems to me when I look at the issues I've seen in my little piece of the world, a lot of the problem are with people who have these mental health wellness challenges. And how are we as a community and as a city and as alders and police department and broader service providers, how are we going to help resolve those? Because I think that's where the distress comes. You know, I think that the 98.5% of the time, you know, you're going to mostly have fine interactions with the police. You know, many people contacted me from my own district saying, you know, they feel fine calling the police and get good service, and I think mostly people do. But how do we make sure that we are able to deal with this increasing level of distress that we see? It's growing. It's the insecurity of people who don't have like money and jobs and housing and all these things. It's just permeating. It's not just the world. It's in Madison too. And so, you know, when everyone says you should be leaders and do X or Y, it's like, how are we going to solve like this kind of larger global crisis? Where I just kind of go, wow, let's just take one step at a time, breathe, keep breathing, and keep going forward. So I appreciate Shiva's idea about an ad hoc committee. I do question, you know, what would our relationship be to the ad hoc committee? And because I thought about that ad hoc committee when we first formed it, you know, it's going to take some time. What's the relationship of short-term action to the longer-term deep dive? I don't know, but I do feel the emergency, and just waiting doesn't seem like the right answer either. So I appreciate everybody coming and some of the residents coming, and I'm sure we'll keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson McKinney, to be followed by Alderperson Eskridge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was at a meeting earlier today, and the director of the program talked about Mike. That was the person that was killed. And he talked about Mike in a very emotional way. And he talked about the years that he had known Mike, who was a very smart individual, when he was healthy. And he made that a point when he was healthy, because he had some strong mental health problems. I want to put that out there. The second thing I want to put out there is that this is not a safe space. This meeting was held at 4:30 in the afternoon, downtown Madison. And when you look around the room, it is not a representation of the folks most directly impacted. And when we talk about harm, and we talk about restoration, and we talk about all those good sounding words, they are relatively empty because the people most impacted are somehow left out of the conversation. I wanted to put that out there. And we have victims all over the place. There's a ripple effect of what this causes. And the ad hoc committee is well and good, but each one of us sitting in our positions as automatic districts, this is impacting us all, right? It's not impacting a committee of 5 or committee of 8. It impacts us all. And whether it's a committee of the whole, I don't know, but we really are accountable to the constituents who've been sending us positive responses and negative responses. And so I guarantee you, when you establish an ad hoc committee, your constituents are going to question that ad hoc committee. So my question is always, who is responsible? Who's taking the ownership? In District 1, I have to take the ownership. And in your districts, you have to take the ownership. So I know that there is a need to hear the harm and do some healing, but it goes on all sides. I cannot even imagine how it would feel to take someone else's life. Cannot even imagine. what that has, that the replications are not only community-wise, but what does it feel to know that you took someone else's life? So when we're looking at the ripple effect of the harm, we have to look at the whole spectrum. So when we talk about health and we talk about healing, and we have to go right to divisiveness. Our community is so divided down racial lines. That's unfortunate, because the intent was never an either or. It never was against, it was an and. Where did we lose the and in this whole discussion? It's either or. And so as a body and as someone who sits on this council, my heart is just so heavy. And it's really heavy now because it's on our plate. It's on our watch. This has happened on our watch. I applaud Alder DeMar for stepping forward, and I know that you have taken some hits, but it's on our watch. It's on our new leadership watch. We cannot pass it on. It is before us. We cannot sweep it under the rug. It is not going to go away. This is a time such as this that we in leadership have to hear the good with the bad. And right now, I challenge all of us to own this. The ad hoc committee can't own it for us. We have to own this. And so I implore those conversations, and we gotta move it from downtown Madison at 4:30 in the afternoon. We're not hitting it. And I challenge us, so that means we have to move this into a place where residents feel safe in coming and talking to us. We need to do that. It can't be done in this environment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alderperson Eskridge, to be followed by Alderperson Fair.
Thank you. So I'm struck by what many of my colleagues have said. I think that my central theme this evening is going to be collaboration. And really acknowledging that we as a council and a body can't know everything or do everything or solve everything, but that we have many jobs. And I think this is kind of a mix between what Alder Rummel and Alder McKinney just said, speaking of that community leader role that we play and how that has to inform our role as policymakers and trying to distinguish what we can do in all of these different roles that we play. And so I want to say very briefly that I think that requires information, and we've made some steps to get more information. I think that's what we did through our ad hoc committee and funding the study and looking at policies and procedures, and that's one piece of information gathering that could inform some policy options and policy change that's likely needed. But then there's this other piece that Alder Rummel started to talk about around what is our safety net as a community, and how does that contribute to the situation that we find ourselves in right now. And that's the piece that at least I don't feel informed enough about. So whose responsibility is what, and what would it look like for someone to be called in a situation like what happened last week? That's not just a police department, and getting everyone the support that they need. I just don't think that we know yet. We don't know who has resources and authority and power to do what in some of these instances. So I guess unfortunately I don't really have an exact next step on that, except to say that this kind of gets back to that piece around what is our resource map locally, and can we look at what county funding does and what city funding does and what private funders are doing, and actually have a landscape of what that is doing currently so that we can better leverage those resources and collaborate. Because unless we do that, we as the City of Madison 20 alders are not going to be able to get anywhere significant, right? We can do things, but not the kind of change that I feel our community is demanding right now. And so I'm hoping that we can start to have those conversations probably as part of the budget process, because that's where we really make the decisions where we put our funding, as to where our funding is going currently and how that is leveraged by other funding sources in our community. And that's going to require staff time and resources to help us figure that out so that we can better use our resources as we have them. So that's a little disjointed, but that's where my head is at right now is, how do we know what our job is as policymakers on that safety net piece of this conversation? Because that's a piece that we haven't really started to figure out how we attack.
Thank you. Alderperson Fair to be followed by Alderperson Sheets.
Thanks, I'll be really quick. I had two themes I was going to speak on. One certainly been spoken on a lot, and the first was divisiveness. And Alder Mark, I think, painted that picture very well. It's been very, very difficult to see that sort of divisiveness that we see, and it's so, in some ways, it's very innocent, I think, and then on the other hand, I feel like it's not innocent at all. It's very implicit. But that has, and I can't help but, it's not the only reason. There's been background to it, and there's all kinds of things been bubbling in our community for years and years and years and years. And I almost don't want to bring it up, but it's been brought up already, but that blog really just hit on a thing that exists, and it fired people up in so many ways, and and we're still living with it, and it's truly a shame. It's not a shame that people can have their opinions about things. That's great. I love hearing from my constituents. But as Alder DeMar said, the either or. That's not how the world is. And it's been very hard to talk to the community, which leads to my second point, about how the world actually is. It's not, well, if you want to have a study of the police department, you hate the police department, which is what we've heard. Or the other way around as well. Hey, you're doing a study, great, because you know what, those police suck, or whatever. Which we do hear that too. Neither are true. Which gets me to my second point I want to just discuss is unified. And I know as a council it's impossible to be unified, and it's impossible truly to ask that because we have 20 constituencies, we have 20 minds, etc. But I think as much as we possibly can on this, we need to work together. I'm not even speaking in collaboration with other organizations or other funders, I'm talking about us, especially as we present this to the community. As much as we can work together and be unified on how we move forward, because when we're not, and we're one group of alders is doing this and another is doing this, folks, it doesn't, I was able to step back a couple thousand miles or 3,000-4,000 miles and think about this a little bit and look at Facebook once in a while when I got coverage, and it sort of looks like a circus sometimes. And we're bringing some of that on ourselves, and there's all kinds of other factors. So how do we work together? We're not going to agree on everything, how we go forward and what kind of body we set up to look at this in addition to the body that's already set up, all those questions. But let's try as best we can to present it in a unified way. It will make the whole process better, and it'll make us look better, be better for the community, quite frankly.
Thank you. Alderperson Sheets, to be followed by Alderperson Carter.
I want to start by thanking those that were able to come out and share with us their feedback. I know that if, as Alder McKinney pointed out, had it maybe been in a different location at a different time, or maybe if we, and I'll take responsibility for that myself, have done a better job of providing it, maybe some larger subset of the hundreds of emails that we would have gotten, we would have heard back from more people. But it's always great to be able to get feedback from the community, and while the feedback we heard today, I think, was representative of a sliver of the voice, I think it would have been nice to be able to hear from a greater diversity of opinions, and so I hope that in future meetings people feel willing to speak out across the spectrum of ideas. As Alder Eskridge was talking about ideas, and I think someone else mentioned this, one of the things that come to mind just to share with you guys is, after Heather Allen did some fantastic work for Alder Fair and I around youth violence prevention, one of the initiatives in there was around a crisis response center, which comes out of a work group that the county put together last year. And in a community meeting that we had, following up on that, one of the most cool ideas that we heard in response to that was, well, the biggest cost of that crisis response center is the capital cost of a building. What if it just wasn't a building? What if it was just a crisis response SWAT team? Folks that just paratroop down and are able to respond. So there's the beginnings of an idea there, and that's certain, how that shakes out. But I wanted to share that because all of us are oftentimes in really cool, little tiny conversations that never get spread. To Alder Fair's points about unity, actually, I'm really proud of our council and the unity that we've shown in the past several weeks and even here tonight. I think that the unity that the public will hear from us and has heard from us is consistent desire to have a level head. I think that that's one of the things that I've been really impressed with all of my colleagues in trying our very best to stay out of the with us or against us arguments that others try to create and frame for our community. I think we've done, it would have been actually easier in many ways for us to decide to retreat to a corner and participate in a war that gets framed to us in the nasty gram emails that we get, and the responses I've seen from my colleagues, and certainly the responses I've seen in public. And I think we've done a really phenomenal job of demonstrating a level head and a consistent sense of desire to struggle realistically as leaders, recognizing that there are ripple effects to the words that we say in public, that there is palpable harm that can be done from us speaking off the cuff in unproductive ways. And I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to avoid that. So to the extent that that continues to be true, I'm really proud of the unity that we've shown so far. And as we seek to move forward with a greater sense of unity, I hope that council leadership can continue to assume responsibility for, I hope that council leadership can assume responsibility for representing the council's voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson Carter to be followed by Alderperson Vidar.
Thank you. And I also want to thank my colleagues for their comments and suggestions. This discussion of issues surrounding the community and the Madison Police Department was brought to us. People wanted to come to this body and discuss this, and I think that that was very courageous of each one of you to come here to the committee of the whole to express your feelings. I want to say that I'm also appreciative of the emails and telephone calls that we've all received, that people feel free to tell us their opinion. Whether we agree with their opinion or not is not the issue. I want to actually keep this conversation going, but in the direction of resolution and solutions. Whether that is from a committee in the interim, or waiting for the audit committee, audit firm to be hired. But let me just put this in perspective, because 20 years ago, we would hear this from someone who might have been at Easttown. We wouldn't have heard this on the news. 30 years ago, we wouldn't have heard it on the news unless someone was there that called a reporter, which is very unlikely. And as much as I hate seeing selfies of my little cousins, email to me on a daily basis. I'm really thankful for the cell phone and the smartphone, if you can operate it, of course. But it's brought everything to the forefront. It's out of the shadows, it's out of your living room, it's out of a friend of a friend of a friend that told you that something happened 3 weeks ago. We are at a point today where not only are we discussing this openly, but I think we're also at a point today where people want to see a solution. And they want to see a resolution. And they don't want to have a continued conversation 5 years from now. And I'm really grateful for that. And I want to encourage all of us, including the public, let's work together because we're all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson Vidar.
I get a second chance since I started, right? So
You do.
an hour later. I make full circle to it. I absolutely and totally agree with everything that all my colleagues have said. And I think it speaks to really the really challenging place that we find ourselves again. Not as all of the other residents in our city that are emailing us and telling us, but as elected members of this body, we have a different level of responsibility. We need to step up to our level of responsibility. And I would say, I totally would like to have the meeting somewhere else, not District 5. We don't need to have any meetings there. People know how to get downtown from District 5, but anywhere else. But I will tell you, I think we've heard everything that we need to hear from many, many people. I think we can have more conversation, but what I keep hearing is what Alder Carter just said. People want us to do something. I think continuing to just have conversations without kind of a specific charge or rule of what that conversation is going to lead to is only going to lead to further frustration. And I find myself frustrated because, and again, I understand, as you all know me, I'm very kind of like, I need to get things done. So I know that that's one of my certainly maybe strengths and weaknesses too. But I do feel like we have a responsibility to move the conversation forward and to do something about it. Because if not, the conversation just continues, and that's fine. We could all sit back and see the conversation happen, but that is not what we were elected to this body. If I was just on Facebook and I was just kind of a resident of the city, I could participate, let the conversations happen, share my opinions. We have a different level of standard that we need to live up to, as hard as it is. And so I'll end with saying, what's next? Because we're out of time, and as I said, and I will also say, when I said a group of 3 or 5, I want to be in context that, as with any of our community, 20 people can decide to show up to those same conversations. I just have not seen, again, I work in different environments. In my work environment, you got a team that works on things. It's kind of like they work intensely on something, and then they come back with a full proposal that, again, the body of 20 would have to discuss and approve. But it's really hard to really make progress in the information that we need, like Alder Eskridge was saying, okay, we can make a list of the things that we need. There needs to be that back and forth. What the people need, all 20 could give input, we go out, request it, get it, put it together, and somebody needs to do that kind of work. And unless council leadership decides to be the ones doing all that work and getting all of our input and adding another 20 hours to your individual lives, I don't see us move forward. I just see us continuing to come back to another meeting and having more conversations and then going back and having another meeting. And that's very frustrating to me personally, and I've heard lots of frustration from people about that kind of lack of resolution, as Alder Carter said.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on this item? Seeing none, then let me just say from the chair, we do have the library director and library planner that are patiently waiting in the wings to present to us momentarily, but I do appreciate this feedback tremendously, especially the very concrete proposal by Alderperson Vidar for an ad hoc committee or subcommittee. And I'd encourage each and every one of you and our colleagues that aren't present to let President Pro Tem Rummel and myself know your additional thoughts. Obviously, our time was very limited today to talk about this, but if you could give us your feedback in the next few days, we will work toward very concrete actions in the coming days and not let this issue wait certainly until, for example, our next committee meeting of this body, which is not for another month, as we all know.